Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the glass doors of Elite Martial Arts Academy at exactly 6 a.m., just as she had done every morning for the past 3 years. The early morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. She moved quietly, her worn sneakers making soft, squeaking sounds against the surface she would soon be cleaning. The gym was empty except for the distant sound of someone hitting a heavy bag in the back training room. Maria preferred these quiet morning hours before the chaos of classes began. She could work in peace, take her time, and think about her daughter Sophia, who was still sleeping at home. Maria was 42 years old, a single mother who had immigrated to the United States from El Salvador 15 years ago with nothing but hope and determination. Her hands were rough from years of cleaning work. Her back ached from bending over mops and vacuum cleaners, but she never complained. This job at the Martial Arts Academy paid better than her previous cleaning jobs, and the owner, Mr. Chun, treated her with respect. She started her routine in the main training area, a large open space with mirrors covering one entire wall. The floor was covered with thick blue mats that needed to be swept and disinfected every morning. Students practiced karate, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and mixed martial arts here. Maria had watched hundreds of classes over the years while cleaning, learning the names of different techniques, and understanding the discipline these martial arts required. As she swept the mats, Maria thought about Sophia, her 18-year-old daughter, who would be starting college in the fall. Sophia had worked hard in high school, maintaining straight A's while working part-time at a local restaurant to help with family expenses. Maria felt proud, but also worried about paying for college tuition, textbooks, and all the other costs that came with higher education. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. 3 young men entered the main training area, their conversation loud and filled with laughter. Maria recognized them as regular students. The one in front was Derek Mitchell, a 25-year-old who had earned his black belt 6 months ago. Derek came from a wealthy family, drove an expensive sports car, and often talked about his father's successful business. Behind Derek walked his 2 friends, Tommy and Jake, both brown belts who seemed to follow Derek's lead in everything. They wore matching gym clothes with the Academy's logo and carried expensive equipment bags. Maria continued sweeping, trying to stay out of their way as they prepared for their morning training session. She had learned over the years that it was best to remain invisible while students were around. Most treated her kindly or simply ignored her presence, which was fine with Maria. Derek began stretching on the mats, his movements smooth and confident. He had natural athletic ability and had progressed quickly through the belt ranks. However, his attitude had changed since earning his black belt. He had become more arrogant, more demanding, and sometimes rude to newer students. "This place better be clean," Derek said loudly, glancing at Maria. "I don't want to train on dirty mats." Maria looked up briefly, making eye contact for just a moment before returning to her work. She had cleaned these mats thoroughly the night before and again this morning. They were spotless. Tommy laughed at Derek's comment. "Yeah, we pay good money to train here. Everything should be perfect." Jake joined in, emboldened by his friend's attitude. "Maybe she doesn't understand English very well. Should we speak slower?" Maria understood every word. Her English had improved significantly over the 15 years she had lived in the United States. She spoke with an accent, yes, but her comprehension was excellent. She had taken night classes when Sophia was younger, studying by candlelight when the electricity was shut off during particularly difficult financial periods. Derek continued his warm-up routine, performing high kicks and complex combinations. He was genuinely skilled, Maria had to admit. She had watched enough classes to recognize good technique when she saw it. But skill in martial arts was supposed to come with respect, humility, and discipline. Derek seemed to have missed those lessons. "Hey, cleaning lady," Derek called out, his voice carrying across the gym. "When you're done with whatever you're doing over there, the men's bathroom needs attention. The toilet paper holder is loose." Maria nodded politely. "I will check it after I finish here, sir." Derek's eyebrows raised in surprise. "Oh, she does speak English. Good. Makes things easier." More students began arriving for the early morning class. Among them was Sarah Kim, a dedicated brown belt who had been training for 4 years. Sarah worked as a nurse at the local hospital and often came to train before her shifts. She was one of the most respected students at the academy, known for her technical skill and helpful attitude toward newer students. Also arriving was Marcus Washington, a quiet black belt in his 30s who worked as a high school teacher. Marcus had been training for over 10 years and was considered one of the most knowledgeable students at the academy. He often helped Mr. Chun with teaching responsibilities. As more students filled the training area, Maria moved to the edges of the room, cleaning the mirrors and organizing equipment. She tried to make herself as unobtrusive as possible, but Derek's voice continued to carry across the room. "I'm thinking about competing in the state championships next month," Derek announced to his friends. "My dad thinks it would be good for my college applications. You know, show leadership and athletic achievement." Tommy nodded enthusiastically. "You'd definitely win. You're probably the best fighter in this whole gym." Sarah overheard the conversation and glanced over with a slight frown. She had sparred with Derek many times and knew that while he was skilled, his attitude often got in the way of his performance. Confidence was important in martial arts, but overconfidence could be dangerous. Marcus was setting up equipment in the corner and also noticed Derek's boastful conversation. As a teacher, Marcus was sensitive to different types of personalities and had observed Derek's progression from confident student to arrogant young man. It concerned him, especially knowing that martial arts were supposed to teach humility along with physical skills. Derek continued talking loudly, seemingly unaware or uncaring that others could hear him. "My dad's golf partner knows one of the judges for the state tournament. Not that I need any help winning, but it doesn't hurt to have connections." Maria continued her work, but she was listening to every word. In El Salvador, she had grown up in a culture where respect for others, especially elders, was paramount. The way Derek spoke, the casual arrogance in his voice, reminded her of the wealthy young men in her home country who looked down on working people like her family. The official class time was still 15 minutes away, but students were warming up and practicing techniques. Derek and his friends claimed a large section of the mats, making it clear they expected others to work around them. "This place is getting crowded," Derek complained, looking around the room. "Maybe they should have separate training times for serious students and beginners." Sarah couldn't help herself. "Everyone here is serious about training, Derek. That's why they show up at 6:30 in the morning." Derek shrugged. "Some people are more serious than others. Some people are actually going somewhere with their training." The comment stung because Sarah knew it was directed at her and other students who trained for personal improvement rather than competition glory. She had gotten into martial arts after a car accident left her with physical therapy needs. The discipline and physical challenge had helped her recover and become stronger than she had ever been before. Marcus decided to intervene before the conversation became more heated. "Let's focus on our own training," he said calmly. "Class starts soon." Derek seemed to take Marcus's comment as a challenge to his authority. Even though Marcus was older and had been training longer, Derek's recent black belt promotion had inflated his sense of importance. "Right, we should probably get serious," Derek said, his voice carrying a hint of sarcasm. "Can't have any distractions." He looked directly at Maria as he said this, making it clear that he considered her presence a distraction. Maria felt the heat of embarrassment rise in her cheeks, but she continued working. She needed this job. Sophia's college tuition depended on it. Other students were beginning to notice the tension in the room. The academy usually had a positive, supportive atmosphere where students encouraged each other regardless of skill level. Derek's attitude was creating an uncomfortable environment that everyone could feel. Jennifer Lopez, a green belt who had been training for 8 months, glanced nervously between Derek and Maria. Jennifer worked as a social worker and was particularly sensitive to dynamics of power and disrespect. She had started training at the academy specifically because it had a reputation for being welcoming and inclusive. David Park, a blue belt who owned a small restaurant in town, also noticed the uncomfortable atmosphere. David had always appreciated Maria's quiet professionalism and often greeted her politely when their paths crossed in the gym. As Maria moved closer to where Derek was warming up, she accidentally bumped into his equipment bag with her cleaning cart. The bag was sitting in the middle of the walkway, but Derek had left it there without considering that others might need to pass by. "Watch it," Derek snapped, his voice sharp and loud enough for the entire room to hear. That bag has expensive equipment in it. Maria immediately stopped and looked at the bag, checking to make sure nothing had fallen out or been damaged. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't see it there. Derek stood up from his stretching position, his face showing irritation. Maybe you need to pay more attention to where you're going instead of just pushing that cart around wherever you want. The room felt noticeably quieter. Students who had been chatting or warming up were now watching the interaction with growing discomfort. This was crossing a line from general rudeness into something more serious. Sarah stepped forward slightly, her instinct to defend someone being treated unfairly overriding her usual desire to avoid confrontation. Derek, it was just an accident. The bag is fine. Derek turned his attention to Sarah, clearly annoyed that she was challenging him. I'm just saying people should be more careful around other people's property, especially when they're being paid to clean, not get in the way. Marcus also moved closer, his teacher instincts recognizing a situation that needed de-escalation. Let's just get ready for class, he said firmly. Mr. Chun will be here soon. But Derek seemed energized by the attention he was getting. His friends Tommy and Jake were watching with amusement, which encouraged him to continue. I mean, it's not like this is rocket science, Derek said, gesturing toward Maria's cleaning cart. Stay out of the way when students are training. Pretty simple concept. Maria felt her face burning with shame and anger, but she kept her expression neutral. She had experienced discrimination before and had learned that reacting emotionally only made situations worse. She moved her cart to the side of the room and continued organizing cleaning supplies. Jennifer, the social worker, felt her stomach tighten with anger. She had seen this kind of behavior before in her professional life, and it always made her furious. But she was still relatively new to the academy and didn't feel confident speaking up against a black belt. David Park clenched his fists, thinking about his own immigrant parents who had faced similar treatment when they first came to America. His father had worked as a janitor while learning English and building the restaurant business. David remembered the stories of customers who treated his father with disrespect simply because of his job and accent. More students continued to arrive, including Linda Thompson, a purple belt in her 50s who worked as a librarian, and James Rodriguez, a brown belt who was a police officer. Both immediately sensed the tension in the room, but weren't sure what had caused it. Derek seemed to be enjoying the attention and decided to push further. You know, in some gyms, they have cleaning staff come in after hours so they don't interrupt training time. Maybe that's something to consider here. This comment was clearly directed at Mr. Chin's management decisions, but it was also another attack on Maria's right to be in the space during her working hours. Sarah had heard enough. Maria has been cleaning here for years, Sarah said firmly. She does her job well and doesn't bother anyone. Maybe you should focus on your own training instead of criticizing people who are just trying to do their work. Derek's face flushed with anger at being publicly challenged by Sarah. Maybe you should focus on getting better at jiu-jitsu instead of defending people who don't need defending. The comment hit Sarah hard because Derek knew she had been struggling with a particular submission technique that he had successfully used against her during their last sparring session. Using someone's weaknesses against them in a personal attack was completely against the principles of martial arts training. Marcus stepped directly between Derek and Sarah. That's enough. This isn't how we behave in this academy. Derek looked around the room and realized that most of the other students were staring at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. But instead of backing down, his pride made him double down on his behavior. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking, Derek said defensively. We're here to train seriously, not to tiptoe around people who can't do their jobs without getting in the way. This was completely untrue. Maria never got in the way of training, and everyone in the room knew it. She was professional, efficient, and respectful. Derek was creating a problem where none existed. Linda Thompson, despite being soft-spoken by nature, couldn't stay silent. Maria has never interfered with anyone's training. She's always been courteous and professional. James Rodriguez nodded in agreement. I've been coming here for 2 years, and Maria has never caused any problems for anyone. Derek was now facing opposition from multiple students, but his pride wouldn't let him admit he was wrong. Look, I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I'm just saying there's a time and place for everything. But Everyone could see through his attempt to sound reasonable. His tone, his words, and his entire attitude had been disrespectful from the beginning. Maria continued working, pretending not to hear the conversation that was entirely about her. Inside, she was struggling with a mixture of emotions. Part of her wanted to defend herself, to tell these young people about her education, her intelligence, her sacrifices for her daughter's future. Another part of her just wanted to disappear, to avoid any more conflict that might threaten her job. She thought about Sophia, probably still sleeping at home, dreaming about her future at college. Maria thought about the tuition payments, the textbooks, the dorm room costs. She thought about all the mornings she had woken up at 4:30 a.m. to get to this job, all the evenings she had worked a second job cleaning offices, all the weekends she had spent doing laundry for other families to earn extra money. Derek didn't know any of this. He didn't know about Maria's intelligence, her dedication, her dreams for her daughter's future. He saw only a cleaning woman with an accent, someone he could look down on to make himself feel more important. The sound of keys jingling at the front door interrupted the tense conversation. Mr. Chun was arriving to open the academy for the morning classes. Everyone could hear his footsteps approaching the main training area. Derek quickly moved back to his warm-up routine, pretending that nothing had happened. His friends Tommy and Jake followed his lead, suddenly, becoming very interested in their stretching exercises. Sarah, Marcus, and the other students who had witnessed the confrontation exchanged meaningful glances. They all knew that something needed to be done about Derek's behavior, but they weren't sure what or how. Mr. Chin entered the room with his usual warm smile and friendly greeting. "Good morning, everyone. Ready for a great training session?" The responses were more subdued than usual, and Mr. Chin immediately noticed that something was off. He had been running this academy for 15 years and was very sensitive to the atmosphere in his school. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, looking around the room with concern. Maria looked up from her cleaning cart and made eye contact with Mr. Chun. For just a moment, he saw something in her expression that told him there had been some kind of problem. But Maria simply nodded and said, "Good morning, Mr. Chun." Derek jumped in quickly, his voice artificially cheerful. "Everything's great, Mr. Chun. Just getting warmed up for class." But Mr. Chun wasn't convinced. He had noticed the way students were positioned in the room, the way some were avoiding eye contact, the way others seemed uncomfortable. Something had definitely happened. As Mr. Chun began setting up for class, Maria finished organizing her supplies and prepared to leave the main training area. Her work in this room was done for the morning, and she needed to clean the bathrooms and locker rooms before the academy got busy. She pushed her cart toward the exit, moving slowly and carefully to avoid any more incidents. As she passed near Derek, she heard him whisper to his friends, "Finally." The word was quiet enough that Mr. Chin didn't hear it, but several students did. It was the final insult, the clear indication that Derek viewed Maria as nothing more than an annoyance to be tolerated. Sarah clenched her fists in anger. Marcus shook his head in disappointment. Jennifer felt sick to her stomach. David Park looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't know what. Maria heard the whisper too, but she didn't react. She simply continued pushing her cart out of the room, her back straight and her dignity intact despite everything that had just happened. As she left, the students remaining in the room looked at each other with a mixture of shame and anger. They all knew they had just witnessed something wrong, something that went against everything martial arts were supposed to teach about respect, humility, and treating others with dignity. Derek seemed satisfied with himself, completely unaware that later that morning, Maria was cleaning the women's locker room when she heard familiar voices approaching. She recognized Sarah Kim's voice and that of Linda Thompson, the librarian who trained at the academy. They were talking quietly, but their conversation was clearly about what had happened earlier. "I can't believe Derek acted that way," Sarah was saying. "It was completely inappropriate. He's been getting worse ever since he got his black belt," Linda replied. "The promotion went to his head." Maria continued cleaning the sinks, trying not to listen, but the women entered the locker room, and their conversation continued. "Someone needs to talk to Mr. Chun about Derek's attitude," Sarah said. "What happened this morning was just wrong." Linda nodded in agreement. "Maria doesn't deserve to be treated like that. She's always been professional and respectful." Both women noticed Maria working nearby and seemed embarrassed that she might have overheard their conversation about her. "Hi, Maria," Sarah said gently. "How are you doing?" Maria looked up and managed a small smile. "I'm fine, thank you." But Sarah could see that Maria was not fine. Her usual quiet confidence seemed shaken, and there was something sad in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "What Derek said this morning was completely out of line," Sarah said directly. "You should know that most of us don't feel that way at all." Maria appreciated the kindness, but she also felt uncomfortable being the subject of discussion. "It's okay. I'm used to it." The phrase, "I'm used to it," hit both Sarah and Linda hard. It suggested that Maria had experienced this kind of treatment before, perhaps many times. The casual acceptance in her voice made the situation even more heartbreaking. "It's not okay," Linda said firmly. "And you shouldn't have to be used to it." After Sarah and Linda left for their class, Maria sat alone in the locker room for a moment. She thought about Derek's behavior and about all the other times in her life when people had looked down on her because of her job, her accent, or her circumstances. She remembered her first job in America, cleaning office buildings at night. Some employees would leave deliberately messy areas, as if testing to see how much disrespect she would tolerate. She remembered grocery store clerks who spoke to her slowly and loudly, assuming she didn't understand English. She remembered parent-teacher conferences where some teachers seemed surprised that she cared deeply about Sophia's education. But Maria also remembered the many people who had treated her with kindness and respect. Mr. Chun had always been fair and appreciative of her work. Most of the students at the academy were polite and friendly. Her daughter's favorite teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had spent extra time helping Sophia with college applications and had written a beautiful recommendation letter. Maria knew that Derek's behavior said more about him than it did about her. But that knowledge didn't make the experience less painful. She finished her work in the locker room and moved on to clean the bathrooms. As she worked, she could hear the sounds of the morning class in progress. Students were practicing techniques, receiving instruction from Mr. Chun, and encouraging each other during sparring exercises. The academy had always felt like a positive place to Maria. She enjoyed watching the students learn and grow, seeing shy beginners gain confidence, and watching dedicated practitioners master complex techniques. The martial arts seemed to bring out the best in most people, teaching them discipline, respect, and humility. That's why Derek's behavior was so disappointing. He had clearly learned the physical techniques of martial arts, but he had missed the deeper lessons about character and treating others with dignity. Around 10 a.m., Maria was taking her lunch break in the small employee break room when her phone rang. The caller ID showed Sophia's number, which was unusual since her daughter should have been in class at this time. "Mama." Sophia's voice sounded excited. "Are you sitting down?" Maria smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "Yes, Mija. What's happening?" "I just got a call from the admissions office at State University," Sophia said, her words coming quickly. "They're offering me a full academic scholarship. Full tuition, plus money for books and living expenses." Maria felt her heart stop for a moment. This was beyond their best dreams. They had hoped Sophia might qualify for some financial aid, but a full scholarship would change everything. "Are you sure?" Maria asked, hardly daring to believe it. "Yes. They said my grades, test scores, and essays were outstanding. The scholarship covers everything for 4 years as long as I maintain a 3.5 GPA. Tears began streaming down Maria's face. All those years of working multiple jobs, all those nights of helping Sophia with homework while fighting exhaustion, all those sacrifices had led to this moment. "Mama, are you crying?" Sophia asked with concern. "Happy tears, Mija. I'm so proud of you. This means you won't have to work so hard anymore," Sophia said. "You can maybe find a job with better hours, or maybe even go back to school yourself like you always wanted." Maria had indeed always wanted to continue her education. In El Salvador, she had completed 2 years of university study in business administration before economic circumstances forced her to leave school and eventually immigrate to the United States. It had always been a dream of hers to finish her degree someday. After she hung up with Sophia, Maria sat in the break room, feeling overwhelmed with emotion. The contrast between Derek's treatment of her that morning and this incredible news about Sophia's scholarship was almost too much to process. She thought about all the assumptions Derek had made about her based on her job and appearance. He had no idea about her intelligence, her education, her dreams, or her daughter's achievements. He had seen only what he wanted to see, someone he could look down on to make himself feel superior. Maria wiped her tears and returned to work with a new sense of purpose. Derek's disrespect had stung, but Sophia's success proved that their family was on the right path. Hard work, education, and treating others with dignity were the values that mattered. Meanwhile, in the main training area, Mr. Chun was conducting the advanced class. Derek was participating, but several of the other students seemed less engaged than usual. The morning's incident had affected the atmosphere of the entire academy. During a water break, Marcus approached Mr. Chun privately. "Can I speak with you about something?" "Of course," Mr. Chun replied, immediately sensing the serious tone. Marcus briefly explained what had happened that morning with Derek and Maria. He was careful to stick to facts and avoid inflammatory language, but he made it clear that Derek's behavior had been inappropriate and disrespectful. Mr. Chin listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail. As the owner of the academy, he had worked hard to create an environment based on respect, discipline, and mutual support. Derek's behavior was completely contrary to the values the academy was supposed to represent. "Thank you for telling me," Mr. Chin said quietly. "I'll handle this appropriately." The class resumed, but Mr. Chun was now watching Derek more carefully. He noticed the arrogant way Derek corrected newer students, the dismissive attitude toward those he considered less skilled, and the general lack of humility that should have been developing alongside his technical abilities. During sparring exercises, Derek was paired with Marcus. This was intentional on Mr. Chin's part. Marcus was an excellent martial artist with years more experience than Derek, despite their similar belt ranks. The sparring session was revealing. Derek's technique was good, but his overconfidence led him to take unnecessary risks and ignore defensive fundamentals. Marcus, fighting with calm precision, was able to control the match completely. When Derek attempted a flashy technique he had seen in competition videos, Marcus countered with a simple but effective response that left Derek on the ground, clearly defeated. "Good match," Marcus said, offering his hand to help Derek up. But instead of accepting the lesson gracefully, Derek seemed frustrated and embarrassed. "Lucky shot," he muttered. Mr. Chun had seen enough. After class ended, he asked Derek to stay behind for a private conversation. "Derek, I need to talk to you about something important," Mr. Chun said once the other students had left. Derek assumed he was going to receive praise for his performance or perhaps be offered additional training opportunities. "Sure, Mr. Chun. What's up?" "I heard about your interaction with Maria this morning," Mr. Chun said directly. "I'm very disappointed in your behavior." Derek's face immediately flushed with defensiveness. "It wasn't that big a deal. I just asked her to be more careful around my equipment." "That's not how it was described to me," Mr. Chun replied calmly. "Several students witnessed you being disrespectful and rude to someone who was simply doing her job." Derek realized that other students had reported his behavior, which made him angry rather than remorseful. "People are being too sensitive. I wasn't trying to be mean. Intent matters, Derek, but impact matters more," Mr. Chin said. "Your behavior created a hostile environment and made other students uncomfortable. More importantly, you treated Maria with disrespect." Derek crossed his arms defensively. "Look, I pay good money to train here. I should be able to expect a certain level of professionalism from the staff." The comment revealed exactly what Mr. Chun had suspected. Derek viewed Maria as beneath him and felt entitled to treat her poorly. "Maria is one of the most professional people I've ever worked with," Mr. Chun said firmly. "She's been cleaning this academy for 3 years, and I've never had a single complaint about her work. She's reliable, thorough, and respectful to everyone." Derek seemed surprised that Mr. Chun was defending Maria so strongly. "I just think maybe the cleaning should be done when students aren't training." "Maria has been doing her job at the same time every morning for 3 years," Mr. Chun replied. "She's never interfered with anyone's training before. The problem this morning wasn't with her schedule, it was with your attitude." The conversation continued for several more minutes, but Derek remained defensive and unwilling to accept responsibility for his behavior. He seemed to view the criticism as unfair persecution rather than legitimate feedback about his conduct. Finally, Mr. Chun made a decision. Derek, you're suspended from training for 1 week. Use that time to think about the values we try to teach in this academy: respect, humility, and treating others with dignity. Derek's mouth dropped open in shock. You're suspending me? For what? I didn't do anything wrong. You disrespected a member of our academy family, Mr. Chin said quietly. That's something I take very seriously. Derek's face turned red with anger. This is ridiculous. My dad isn't going to be happy about this. He pays a lot of money for my training here. The threat was implicit but clear. Derek was suggesting that his family's financial contribution to the academy should protect him from consequences for his behavior. Mr. Chin stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Your father is welcome to call me if he has questions about the suspension, but my decision is final. Derek stormed out of the academy, slamming the door behind him. Mr. Chin sat alone in his office, feeling sad about the situation but confident that he had made the right decision. Later that afternoon, Derek called his friends Tommy and Jake to complain about his suspension. He portrayed himself as the victim of unfair treatment and political correctness. Can you believe Chin suspended me over that cleaning woman? Derek said angrily. It's complete nonsense. Tommy and Jake, who had witnessed Derek's behavior that morning, were less sympathetic than Derek expected. Maybe you were kind of harsh, Tommy said hesitantly. Whose side are you on? Derek snapped. I thought you guys were my friends. We are your friends, Jake said. But what you said this morning was pretty mean. Derek hung up on them, feeling betrayed and misunderstood. In his mind, everyone else was wrong, and he was the victim of a conspiracy against him. That evening, Derek's father, Richard Mitchell, received a phone call from his angry son. Derek presented a heavily biased version of the morning's events, portraying himself as unfairly targeted for asking someone to be more careful. Richard Mitchell was a successful businessman who had built his company through hard work and treating employees with respect. However, he had also spoiled his son and rarely held Derek accountable for his behavior. I'll call the academy owner tomorrow, Richard promised. This sounds like an overreaction. But when Richard called Mr. Chin the next morning, he heard a very different version of events. Mr. Chin calmly explained exactly what had happened, emphasizing the disrespectful nature of Derek's behavior and its impact on other students. Mr. Mitchell, I've been running this academy for 15 years, Mr. Chin said. I don't suspend students lightly. Your son's behavior was completely inappropriate. Richard found himself in an uncomfortable position. Deep down, he knew Derek had a tendency toward arrogance and entitlement. There had been incidents at school, at summer camps, and in other activities where Derek's attitude had caused problems. What would it take for Derek to come back? Richard asked. A genuine apology to Maria and a commitment to treating everyone in this academy with respect, Mr. Chin replied. Richard promised to have a serious conversation with his son about the situation. Meanwhile, Maria continued her work at the academy, unaware of Derek's suspension or the conversations it had sparked. She did notice that the atmosphere seemed more positive and relaxed without Derek's presence, but she didn't know why. Several students, including Sarah and Marcus, made a point of greeting Maria warmly and thanking her for her good work. Their kindness helped restore some of her confidence after Derek's hurtful behavior. On Friday of that week, Sophia stopped by the academy to meet her mother after work. She wanted to share her scholarship news with Mr. Chun, who had always been kind to their family. Sophia was a beautiful, articulate young woman who clearly inherited her mother's intelligence and determination. She spoke perfect English with no trace of an accent and carried herself with quiet confidence. When Mr. Chin met Sophia and heard about her full scholarship to State University, he was genuinely excited and impressed. Your mother must be so proud, he said. She is, Sophia replied. She's worked so hard to give me opportunities for education. This scholarship means everything to our family. Mr. Chin looked at Maria with new understanding. He had always respected her work ethic and professionalism, but now he understood more about her sacrifices and dedication as a mother. As they were talking, Derek unexpectedly walked into the academy. His father had driven him there to apologize to Mr. Chun and request readmission to the school. Derek stopped short when he saw Maria talking with Mr. Chun and a young woman he didn't recognize. From their conversation, it was clear that the young woman was Maria's daughter. Derek stared at Sophia in surprise. This articulate, well-dressed college student was the daughter of the cleaning woman he had treated so poorly? The discovery didn't fit with his assumptions about Maria and her family. Mr. Chin noticed Derek's arrival and the surprise on his face. "Derek, I'd like you to meet Sophia Santos, Maria's daughter. Sophia just received a full academic scholarship to State University." Derek stood there awkwardly, unsure how to respond. His father, who had followed him into the academy, stepped forward to introduce himself. "Congratulations on the scholarship," Richard Mitchell said to Sophia. "That's a tremendous achievement." "Thank you," Sophia replied politely. "I'm very excited about starting college." Derek remained silent, struggling to process this new information. The woman he had dismissed as just a cleaning lady was the mother of an academic scholarship recipient. His assumptions about Maria's intelligence, education, and family values were being challenged by reality. Mr. Chun decided this was an appropriate time to address the situation directly. Derek stood in the middle of the academy, feeling more uncomfortable than he had ever felt in his life. The silence stretched on as everyone waited for him to speak. His father's expectant gaze, Mr. Chin's patient expression, and the calm dignity of Maria and Sophia created a pressure he had never experienced before. Derek started, then stopped. The words felt stuck in his throat. In that moment, Derek was forced to confront something he had been avoiding his entire life. The reality that his actions had consequences and that other people had feelings, dreams, and value regardless of their job or circumstances. Looking at Sophia, an accomplished young woman who was clearly intelligent and well-educated, Derek realized how wrong his assumptions about Maria had been. If Maria had raised a daughter like this, if she had sacrificed to ensure Sophia's education and success, then Maria herself must be far more than Derek had imagined. "Mrs. Santos," Derek finally said, his voice much quieter than usual. "I owe you an apology." Maria looked at him with surprise. She had expected him to make some minimal statement to satisfy Mr. Chun and his father, but there was something different in his tone. "What I said the other morning was wrong," Derek continued, the words coming with difficulty. "I was disrespectful to you, and I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. Mr. Chun could see that Derek was genuinely struggling with the admission, which suggested some possibility for growth. Sophia stepped forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Derek, I think you should know that my mother is one of the smartest people I've ever met." Derek looked at Sophia with confusion. This wasn't what he had expected to hear. She completed 2 years of university study in business administration in El Salvador. Sophia continued. "She speaks 3 languages fluently. She helped me with my homework throughout high school, including advanced mathematics and science courses." Each fact hit Derek like a physical blow. He had assumed that Maria was uneducated, unintelligent, somehow less valuable as a person because she worked as a cleaning woman. "She came to this country with almost nothing," Sophia went on, "and she has worked multiple jobs for 15 years to give me opportunities for education. She cleaned offices at night and houses on weekends. She took English classes after 12-hour workdays. She never complained, never gave up, and never lost sight of her dreams for my future." Derek's face was burning with shame. Every assumption he had made about Maria was being systematically dismantled by her daughter's words. "When I was in middle school and struggling with algebra, my mother spent hours every night helping me understand the concepts," Sophia said. "When I was writing my college application essays, she read every draft and gave me thoughtful feedback. She may clean buildings for work, but she is not defined by her job any more than you are defined by yours." Richard Mitchell listened to Sophia's words with growing respect and growing disappointment in his son's behavior. As a businessman, he understood the value of hard work and determination. As a father, he was ashamed that his son had treated someone's mother so disrespectfully. "Sophia," Richard said, "your mother has clearly done an exceptional job raising you. Your scholarship is a testament to both your abilities and her dedication." "Thank you," Sophia replied. "But I want you to understand that what happened here earlier this week wasn't just about hurt feelings. When you treat someone like my mother with disrespect, you're attacking the dignity of someone who has spent her entire adult life working to make the world better for her family. Derek felt like he was shrinking with each word Sophia spoke. He had never been confronted so directly with the human impact of his behavior. Maria finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. Sophia, that's enough. But Sophia wasn't finished. No, Mama. You always tell me to let things go, to not make waves, to just focus on our goals. But sometimes people need to understand that their actions hurt real people with real lives and real dreams. Mr. Chin watched this exchange with deep interest. He was seeing a side of both Maria and Sophia that revealed strength, intelligence, and dignity that Derek had completely missed. Derek, Mr. Chin said, I think you're beginning to understand why your behavior was so inappropriate. Derek nodded slowly. I had no idea. I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't bother to learn, Sophia said bluntly. You made assumptions based on prejudice and ignorance. The words stung because they were true. Derek had looked at Maria and seen only what he expected to see, a cleaning woman with an accent who he could treat as inferior. But here's what I want you to understand, Sophia continued, her voice becoming gentler. Every person in this building has a story, has dreams, has intelligence, and value that you can't see just by looking at them. The white belt who struggles with basic techniques might be a surgeon. The older woman who moves slowly might have been a professional dancer. The quiet man who never speaks up might be a published poet. Derek was beginning to understand that Sophia was teaching him something far more important than any martial arts technique he had ever learned. When you treat someone with disrespect, Sophia said, you're not just being rude. You're failing to recognize their humanity. You're deciding that your comfort, your convenience, your sense of superiority is more important than their dignity. Mr. Chun decided to build on Sophia's lesson. Derek, what do you think martial arts are really supposed to teach us? Derek thought for a moment, realizing that his previous answers about strength and winning competitions now seemed shallow and incomplete. Respect, Derek said hesitantly. Yes, but why? Mr. Chin pressed. Why is respect so central to martial arts? Derek struggled to answer. In all his years of training, he had focused on techniques, competitions, and belt promotions. He had missed the deeper philosophical foundations. Because, Mr. Chun explained, true strength comes from recognizing the strength in others. True confidence comes from building others up, not tearing them down. True mastery means mastering yourself, your ego, your prejudices, your impulses to treat others poorly. Maria listened to this conversation with mixed emotions. She appreciated the defense of her dignity, but she also felt uncomfortable being the center of so much attention. Mr. Chun, Maria said quietly, I should get back to work. Actually, Maria, Mr. Chin said, there's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Could you stay for a few more minutes? Maria looked confused but nodded. Sophia told me about your scholarship, Mr. Chun said to Sophia. Congratulations. But she also mentioned something about your mother's educational background that I didn't know. Maria looked embarrassed. She had never talked about her incomplete university education because it seemed irrelevant to her current job. Sophia said you studied business administration, Mr. Chin continued. Is that correct? Yes, Maria said reluctantly. But I never finished my degree. Would you be interested in finishing it? Mr. Chin asked. Maria looked at him with surprise. I don't understand. Mr. Chin smiled. I've been thinking about expanding the academy's operations. Adding evening classes, maybe some corporate wellness programs, definitely some better business systems. I could use someone with business education to help manage those expansions. Maria stared at him in shock. Are you offering me a different job? I'm offering you a career opportunity, Mr. Chin said. You could work part-time in business development while taking evening classes to finish your degree. The academy would pay for your education as part of your compensation package. Sophia grabbed her mother's hand, her eyes filling with tears of excitement. This was beyond anything they had dreamed possible. You would do that? Maria asked, hardly believing what she was hearing. Maria, you've been reliable, trustworthy, and professional for 3 years, Mr. Chin said. Those are exactly the qualities I need in someone who would help grow this business. Your educational background, and life experience would be valuable assets. Derek watched this conversation with a growing understanding of how completely he had misjudged Maria. Not only was she intelligent and educated, but Mr. Chun was offering her a professional position based on her qualifications and character. There's one condition, Mr. Chun added, looking at Derek. I want Derek to be the first person to congratulate you on your new position. Everyone turned to look at Derek. This was his moment to demonstrate whether he had truly learned from this experience or whether his apology had been empty words. Derek walked over to Maria, his steps slow and deliberate. When he reached her, he extended his hand. Mrs. Santos, he said, his voice clear and sincere. Congratulations on your new job. You deserve this opportunity. Maria looked at his extended hand for a moment, then accepted the handshake. Thank you, Derek. And I want to apologize again, Derek said, but this time I want to apologize for the right reasons. I was wrong to treat you disrespectfully. I was wrong to make assumptions about you based on your job. And I was wrong to think that my position as a black belt gave me the right to look down on anyone. This apology was very different from his first attempt. It was specific, it took responsibility, and it showed genuine understanding of what he had done wrong. I accept your apology, Maria said simply. Sophia watched this exchange with cautious satisfaction. She could see that Derek was making a genuine effort to change his attitude, though she knew that real change would take time and consistent effort. Mr. Chin nodded approvingly. Derek, you can return to training next week. But I want you to understand that this academy is a community where everyone deserves respect regardless of their job, their background, or their skill level. I understand, Derek said. And I'll do better. Richard Mitchell had been watching this entire exchange with a mixture of pride and concern. Pride that his son was finally taking responsibility for his actions, and concern that it had taken such a dramatic confrontation to get to this point. Derek, Richard said, I think we need to have some serious conversations at home about respect and humility. Derek nodded, finally, understanding that his attitude problems extended beyond the martial arts academy. Over the following weeks, Derek's behavior at the academy changed dramatically. He greeted Maria politely when their paths crossed, helped newer students instead of criticizing them, and began to show the humility that should have accompanied his technical skills. The transformation wasn't instant or perfect. Derek still struggled with his ego and had to consciously work on treating others with respect. But the experience with Maria and Sophia had created a fundamental shift in his perspective. Maria began her new role as business development coordinator while taking evening classes to complete her business degree. Her intelligence and work ethic quickly became apparent to everyone at the academy. She developed successful programs that attracted new students and improved the academy's operations. Sophia started college in the fall, excelling in her studies and staying in close contact with her mother. The scholarship that had seemed like a miracle became the foundation for a bright future. Mr. Chin watched these developments with satisfaction. The academy had always been about more than just martial arts techniques. It was about building character, creating community, and helping people become the best versions of themselves. Derek continued his training, but with a completely different attitude. He began to understand that true martial arts mastery wasn't about dominating others, but about mastering himself. He started volunteering to help with children's classes, learning patience and humility by working with young students. One day, about 6 months later, Derek was helping a nervous 8-year-old learn basic techniques when Maria walked by with some business documents. Excuse me, Mrs. Santos, Derek called out politely. Could I ask you a question about the new student registration process? Maria stopped and listened as Derek asked a thoughtful question about improving the experience for new families joining the academy. After Maria answered his question and continued on her way, the 8-year-old student looked up at Derek with curiosity. Is that lady the boss here? The child asked. Derek thought about the question for a moment, realizing how complex the answer was. Maria wasn't the owner of the academy, but she had become an essential part of its leadership team. More importantly, she had taught Derek one of the most important lessons of his life. She's not the boss, Derek said finally, but she's one of the most important people here. She taught me that everyone deserves respect, no matter what job they do. The child nodded seriously, accepting this wisdom without question. Derek smiled, thinking about how much he had changed since that morning when he had treated Maria so poorly. The black belt around his waist represented his technical knowledge of martial arts. But the real lessons about respect, humility, and recognizing the value in every person had come from a woman he had initially dismissed as just a cleaning lady. As Derek continued teaching the young student, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. The martial arts had taught him how to fight, but Maria Santos had taught him how to be a better human being. The academy continued to thrive, built on the foundation of mutual respect that Mr. Chun had always envisioned. Students of all backgrounds trained together, learned from each other, and supported each other's growth both on and off the mats. Maria's story became a quiet inspiration to everyone at the academy. She had faced disrespect with dignity, overcome obstacles through hard work, and achieved success by staying true to her values. Her journey from cleaning woman to business coordinator showed that a person's worth couldn't be measured by their job title or circumstances. Derek's transformation became equally inspiring in its own way. He proved that people could change, that humility could be learned, and that true strength came from recognizing and respecting the strength in others. Years later, when Derek had become an instructor at the academy, he would tell the story of his encounter with Maria to his students. He would explain how his arrogance and prejudice had nearly cost him the opportunity to learn one of life's most important lessons. Never judge someone by their job, their accent, or their circumstances, Derek would tell his students. Every person has a story, has intelligence, has value that you can't see on the surface. Your job as a martial artist, and as a human being, is to treat everyone with the respect they deserve. The lesson that began with a moment of disrespect in a martial arts academy had rippled out to touch many lives. Students learned not just physical techniques, but the deeper principles of character and community. Maria's dignity in the face of prejudice and Derek's willingness to change showed that growth and redemption were always possible. The academy remained a place where people from all walks of life could come together to learn, grow, and support each other. It was a community built on the understanding that true strength came not from looking down on others, but from lifting them up. And at the center of it all was the lesson that a black cleaning lady had taught a black belt student, that respect, kindness, and human dignity were more important than any martial arts technique ever could be. Derek, your father and I spoke about what happened earlier this week. Do you have something you'd like to say? Derek looked around the room uncomfortably. His father was watching expectantly, Mr. Chun was waiting patiently, and Maria and Sophia were both looking at him with expressions of calm dignity. The moment of truth had arrived. Derek had to choose between his pride and doing the right thing. The decision he made would reveal what kind of person he really was beneath all his martial arts training and technical skill. Behavior had actually damaged his reputation with everyone who had witnessed it. He thought he had established his dominance, his importance, his right to be treated as superior to someone like Maria. But what Derek didn't know was that his actions had been noticed by more than just the students in the room. What Derek didn't know was that Maria Santos was much more than a simple cleaning woman. And what Derek didn't know was that his disrespectful behavior was about to lead to consequences he never could have imagined. The morning class was about to begin, but the real lesson was just getting started.